just to present the recording of it alongside the write-up as well. Is that all fine with you still?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, perfect. So, just to kick things off, so I wondered, to what extent is When Dan Lived in the Woods based on reality? Do you ever sort of have dreams of packing it all in and going in to live in the wilderness yourself?
Um, kind of. Not. I mean, they're the kind of dreams that I would never actually do. But the woods that were the inspiration for the book, I can see from my house. And there are times if I'm having a particularly stressful day, and I'll go out to the shops and I'll be walking back, and you glance the woods at the end of the road and you think, oh, it would be, what if? But it's never anything I would ever actually do. But I think it does tap into that kind of feeling that a lot of people have, that sometimes it all gets a bit too much, and they can't ever relax, because this day and age, you've always got your smartphone in your pocket, you've got your emails constantly, all these Facebook notifications and so on. I think a lot of people find it quite hard to just switch off and not do anything for a while.
Yeah, definitely. That makes sense. And I wondered as well, again, because it is sort of based on a reality in some ways, I suppose. I think a lot of writers actually kind of take an idea and run with it and take it to its next conclusion. And I wondered if you think that you sort of write about what you know.
Yeah, the idea first came to me when I was in the woods, which are quite near my house, and I must have been having a pretty bad day or something, and I remember sitting there or standing there, and it was just so quiet and it was peaceful, and you just think, I wonder what would happen if I was to stay here for a long time, or for as long as I could, without any mobile phones, without any kind of modern technology, and just have a bit of time to myself, and how would I survive, and how long would I last before I had to go back to work and my smartphone and this, that, and the other. So it was definitely inspired by real life.
Yeah, cool. And from what I sort of pick up from you online, you're pretty much everywhere. And is it right that you work as a quantity surveyor as well?
That's right, yeah. So I've got the day job for a house builder, working as a quantity surveyor, and then in the evenings it's a lot of writing and articles and stuff, and that's something that one day I'd love to do full time.
Yeah.
My passion is in writing and that kind of thing, but with a family to look after, it's just not practical.
Yeah.
It's certainly nothing I couldn't quite make that leap of faith yet, unfortunately.
And how do you find the time for it all? Because as well, you mentioned your family. It's almost like you've got, your work life, your family life, and your life as a writer as well.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I must have just got into the habit of going to bed pretty late. I've got a wife, obviously. I've got 3 kids.
Yeah.
But really, it's not too bad, because work is obviously set hours, 9 to 5.
Yeah.
The kids will be in bed by 8 o'clock, at the very latest. So, I'll sit down then and I'll do a bit of work, and don't get me wrong, I make it sound like I sit down and hammer out words every night. It's really not like that. A lot of the time I'll just be watching TV with my wife and sitting and eating and talking and stuff. So hopefully I'm not neglecting anyone in the pursuit of writing, but you have to ask them, I suppose.
Well, I think an interesting thing as well, I've noticed you've done a lot of actual sort of parenting blogs as well, and so you kind of bring your family life and your writing life together like that. And I wondered, what are your sort of top 3 tips for any writer who's about to become a parent?
Always focus on the family first would be the main point. I mean, part of what When Dan Lived in the Woods is about is really about the important things in life and what they are. And so many people try and follow a career or try and make as much money as they can, that quite often they'll get to the end of their life and they'll wonder whether they've just been wasting their time, because actually what they've done is neglected the important things like friends and family and the kind of memories that you create. But write when you can. You don't have to sit down and write for hours. You can just take a notepad with you, jot ideas down when they come to you, or drop them down on your phone, because everyone's got one these days, and they can just knock out a quick text message or an email to themselves. And then just when you find the time to write, just let it let it come to you. Really, one thing with writing is you can't just sit down and force it out. You have to be in the right frame of mind. You have to be in the right mindset. So, blogging is always a good thing to do when you're a dad or mum and you're a bit constrained on time, because you can write and update your posts as and when. So it's not like you have to do a certain number every day. And just write with your own voice. Don't try and emulate anyone else, or try and write what you think other people want to read, or the opinions that you think they will agree with. Just stay true to what you think, and write with your own voice, and fairly soon people will start reading your blog and following it.
Yeah, it all makes sense. I've got a few more questions I wanted to ask about when Dan lived in the woods as well. I noticed one of the things through it is obviously sort of, he feels like a bit of a failure, the main character, and although none of his problems are really his fault, and that's kind of mirrored in, he attempts to live in the woods, and he was still going until he kind of got flushed out, and so again he sort of failed at that, but it wasn't really his fault. And I wondered if that was kind of a deliberate thing, whether it was something that you thought about, or whether it's just a sort of a coincidence.
It's not something I'd thought about or focused on for any kind of long period of time, but now you come to mention it, actually, that's an interesting point. I think a lot of people do judge themselves on what other people think of them, and how other people perceive them. And obviously, it's easier said than done, but that's probably not the. You got to do what's right for you, and you've got to look after your own shit and so on. So, a lot of Dan's problems are not purely down to him, but they are. It's not all down to other people. There are ways that he could have influenced things around him which would have made his life a bit easier. For example, at work, if he'd have been a better manager and so on, he wouldn't have had the disrespect from people he worked with that led him to get so stressed in the first place.
Yeah, definitely. And have any of your colleagues read any of your work so far? And if so, what's their feedback been like?
Yeah, they have. Yeah, they've been. The feedback's been very good. You also have to be slightly wary with friends and family with the feedback, because it's, unless they're one of those brutally honest friends that you don't really get on with because they're so honest, they're always going to say it was good or that they enjoyed it. But it's been great. Yeah, and it's not like it's an actual reflection of my working life. I don't, for the record, I don't have a boss who's useless or anything like that. I don't have any company directors who have no respect from any of their colleagues. But
well, you'd have to say that anyway.
Yeah, no, I don't want to turn up to work on Tuesday and get fired. But they've all seemed to enjoy it. In fact, all the feedback I've had so far has been very good, and people are left wanting more and asking if there's another one coming. And it's something I'll give some thought to, I think.
Brilliant. And just in terms of your kind of career so far as a writer, what's been your proudest moment so far?
Well, the last book I wrote before When Dan Lived in the Woods was called How I Came to Hold You, and that was a book for the charity SANS, and that's raised over $1,000 for SANS, and that's been really good, because it's all very well writing a bit of fiction or a couple of semi-humorous books, but it's a good feeling when you're a writer to write something that actually affects people and that they can relate to and makes a difference. And through that book, I've had a number of good opportunities and got invited to Downing Street actually last October, November. So it's brought me some really good things. It was a 2-year project, and it was pretty challenging, but I'm glad I did it.
Brilliant. And I was going to ask you actually, why did you pick SANS above kind of any other charities?
Well, because I've been writing the blog for a couple of years, and so the blog's all about parenting and fatherhood and so on. I wanted to pick a charity that kind of reflected that or was part of, connected to that in some way. And so SANS, dealing with miscarriage and stillbirth and neonatal death is, it's obviously linked, and so you kind of follow through, and I could carry some of the audience through to the book with that. We had a miscarriage back in 2008, but it was fairly early days. It wasn't something although it was upsetting at the time, it didn't profoundly affect us. So, as much as I'd love to say, oh, you've got our own experiences, and that's why I chose Sam, it was really down to I wanted to support a smaller charity that I did have an interest in, but that was related to my blog somehow.
Yeah, definitely. And just a couple more questions just to end on. So one thing we ask everyone is, what was the last book that you read, and what did you think of it?
The last book that I read was The Road by, I can't remember his name now. Cormac McCarthy, I think his name is. I saw the film on Netflix, and I knew it was based on the book, and I read the book, and I thought it's one of the best books I've read, to be honest, because I just love the imagery in it. It's about a post-apocalyptic wasteland, so everything's covered in ash and dirt and dust and so on, but he still somehow manages to make it sound amazing in this beautiful landscape. So I highly recommend it. It's a fantastic book.
Brilliant, I'll check it out. I haven't seen the film either, so I can read the book and then watch the film.
Yeah.
And one last question. What have you got planned for the future? Can you tell us a bit more about your plans as a writer?
I really want to. I want to try and get more articles in national papers and magazines and websites and so on. I want to perhaps get a couple more columns, so the money's coming in a bit more regularly, and just try and increase my profile as a writer and a kind of freelance semi-journalist, so to speak. Just so I've got a bit more work coming in, and there's ideas for a sequel to the Dan book. It wouldn't really be Dan running off and doing something like that again. I think my latest thoughts are that I would essentially have the same story, but write it from another person's perspective. So perhaps Holly's perspective or Amy's perspective, and just kind of there's two sides to every story. So just kind of get everyone's or get a different perspective on the first book. So that's something I'm kind of mulling over in my head at the moment. But short term, I just want to increase the profile of the book and get that out there and market it as much as I possibly can. And then kind of mid to long term is just boosting my portfolio as a writer and getting my name in a few more publications.